Have you ever wondered how two superpowers like the United States and Russia ended up in a decades-long standoff known as the Cold War? The genesis of this icy conflict takes us back to the aftermath of World War II. As the smoke of war cleared, two nations emerged as superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These two nations, however, were not just distinguished by their military prowess, but by their stark ideological differences. On one side, the United States, championing capitalism and democracy, and on the other, the Soviet Union, upholding the principles of communism. This ideological chasm only deepened with the division of Germany into East and West, a physical manifestation of the divide between these two worldviews. It was a conflict not fought with bullets and bombs, but with propaganda and political maneuvering. Thus, the stage was set for a conflict that would last for nearly half a century, a silent war fought not on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of people across the globe. As the 1950s dawned, the Cold War began to heat up, with both the United States and the Soviet Union vying for supremacy. The global stage was set for a battle not fought with bullets and bombs, but with ideology, proxy wars, and the looming threat of nuclear annihilation. In the early 1950s, tensions escalated into open conflict with the Korean War. Here, the United States and the Soviet Union backed opposing sides, turning the Korean peninsula into a chessboard in their global power struggle. This was a new kind of warfare where superpowers manipulated smaller nations as pawns in their bid for dominance. Then came the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 1960s. This was a dangerous game of brinkmanship, with the Soviet Union placing nuclear missiles in Cuba just 90 miles from American shores. The world held its breath for 13 days, as any wrong move could have triggered a nuclear war. Simultaneously, the space race took off. This was another arena where the United States and the Soviet Union sought to outdo each other, this time in technological prowess and exploration of the final frontier. The moon became the ultimate prize, symbolizing the triumph of one ideology over the other. The Vietnam War in the 1960s and 70s further deepened the divide. Once again, the superpowers played their chess game, each supporting a different side in a war that devastated Vietnam and shook the world. Meanwhile, NATO and the Warsaw Pact served as the military arms of the West and East, respectively. Their existence is a constant reminder of the potential for a hot war to erupt from the cold one. These events pushed the world to the brink of nuclear war, a chilling reminder of the destructive potential of this silent conflict. It was a time of high tension and high stakes, a time when the world was precariously balanced on the edge of a knife, the shadow of the Cold War looming large. Yet, as the 1980s approached, the icy relations between the two superpowers began to thaw. The world was no longer a chessboard of black and white, but a complex mosaic of gray. The introduction of détente, a French term meaning relaxation, represented a significant shift in the global political climate. This policy aimed to reduce tensions and promote peaceful coexistence between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT for short, were a series of negotiations that took place between the two superpowers. These discussions were aimed at curbing the arms race that had been escalating since the end of the Second World War. They resulted in two significant treaties, SALT I and SALT II, which marked a turning point in the Cold War. As the decade progressed, two key figures emerged who would play pivotal roles in bringing the Cold War to its conclusion. On one side of the globe, in the United States, we had Ronald Reagan, a president whose strong anti-communist stance was tempered by a willingness to negotiate. Across the ocean in the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev rose to power. Gorbachev, with his policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika, restructuring, represented a new direction for the Soviet Union. These shifts in leadership and policy led to a series of historic meetings between Reagan and Gorbachev. Their discussions culminated in the signing of the INF Treaty in 1987, which eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons. This marked a significant de-escalation in the arms race and paved the way for the end of the Cold War. Just 4 years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union was dissolved. This marked the end of an era that had dominated global politics for nearly half a century. The Cold War had shaped the world in countless ways, from the creation of NATO and the Warsaw Pact to the space race and the rise of the military-industrial complex. And so, the Cold War ended, not with a bang, but with a whisper, as the Soviet Union quietly dissolved into history. But what does the Cold War mean for us today? How has it shaped the world we live in? To answer these questions, we must delve into the vast legacy left by the Cold War, a legacy that continues to influence our world in many ways. In the realm of international relations, the Cold War has had a profound impact. The formation of NATO and the Warsaw Pact, for example, set the stage for the geopolitical alliances we see today. The arms race between the superpowers not only led to a dangerous buildup of nuclear weapons, but also spurred on the development of missile technology, forever changing the face of warfare. The Cold War also brought about significant changes in technology. The space race between the US and the Soviet Union gave birth to a new era of scientific discovery and exploration. The launch of Sputnik in the late 50s and the moon landing in '69 are just two examples of how competition between the superpowers ignited a torrent of technological innovation, the effects of which are still felt today. The cultural impact of the Cold War is also notable. The ideological divide between capitalism and communism was reflected in literature, films, and music. The period saw a boom in spy novels and movies, as well as songs that expressed the hopes, fears, and frustrations of the era. The cultural products of the Cold War era continue to resonate with audiences today, reminding us of a time when the world seemed poised on the brink of disaster. Finally, the Cold War taught us valuable lessons about the dangers of ideological conflict and the importance of diplomacy and dialogue in maintaining world peace. The Cuban Missile Crisis, for instance, showed us how close the world can come to nuclear catastrophe and underscored the need for communication and mutual understanding between nations. In retrospect, the Cold War serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of ideological conflict and the importance of diplomacy and dialogue in maintaining world peace.